what's going on, guys? And before we get into this, I just wanted to let you guys know that this is the first official video with the new camera. I know that this camera isn't as good as the old one. However, if you missed the video a couple days ago that I made talking about why I have to use this new camera, let's just say that my old phone isn't even in one piece anymore. That being said, we make do with what we got, and I hope this new camera still looks at least like decent enough to watch. I'm also sorry if I'm slightly out of frame. I had like a whole thing with my old phone, like I had a whole setup. I knew how to be exactly in frame, but with this one, I'm still trying to figure it out, so bear with me. But anyways, enough blabbering, let's go ahead and talk about 5 hidden gems on the PlayStation 3. Now, you see, normally when I make these videos, I call the video something along the lines of like 5 underrated games on the PS4 that deserve more love or something like that, but I decided I wanted to kind of rename the series and start calling these videos hidden gem videos, because honestly, that's what I view most of these games as, are just hidden gems. And there's definitely a few games in this pile where it might be a little confusing because they're from some pretty well-known series. However, just because a series is well-known doesn't mean that a specific game from a series gets as much love as I feel like it deserves. Anyway, that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the first hidden gem here that we have, which was actually the inspiration for me to make this video, and that is Army of Two. Now, you see, back in the day when Army of Two first launched, I played it, I loved it, and, you know, I went on to play the other games like Army of Two, The 40th Day, and Army of Two, The Devil's Cartel. However, as time has gone on, I've realized nobody ever talks about the Army of Two games, and in fact, I went back and I replayed it the other day. I literally beat it in one afternoon. I just sat down, cleared it out in one sitting. It's not a terribly long game. It's somewhere between like 4 to 5 hours. I believe my latest playthrough took about like 4.5 hours. But anyways, you know, when I played it back in the day, obviously I loved it. I thought it was a great game. But as I went back to replay it now, I realized just how ahead of its time it was in a couple of aspects, specifically the main claim to fame of this game, that being the whole aggro mechanic. Basically, let me go ahead and just kind of like lay down the premise of the game so you can kind of get like a feel for what the game is about. As the title would suggest, you are an army of two. You have your main characters, Rios and Salem, and you two are an army of two. You work for this private military company called the SSC. You're tasked with a bunch of missions throughout the campaign where you go out, you do these contracts, you get paid. But considering the fact that it's basically just you and one other dude going up against literal hundreds of soldiers, the game relies heavily on this mechanic called aggro, where basically you two have to balance who is taking aggro at one point. So basically, to explain it in the simplest terms, the more that you shoot, the more that the enemies will be aggroed onto you, and the more that your partner shoots, the more that the enemies will be aggroed onto them. And that may seem like a very simple concept and one that has been in some other games, but trust me, once you play the game and once you experience it for yourself, you will realize just how important it is to this game and how well it was developed. In fact, it's such a big part of the game that there is a meter on your screen at all times. It's not a big meter, it doesn't get in the way at all. In fact, it's very important to the game. Like, it's a good thing that the meter is there, but it's at the top of your screen. It just shows like who the aggro is leaning more towards at that current point in time. And the more that the aggro is on your partner, the more that you're almost like invisible to the enemies because they're so focused on your partner, and you're able to kind of like go around the enemy, sneak around them, pick them off one by one as they're focused on your partner. And again, it may seem like kind of gimmicky or it may sound kind of simple as I'm explaining it, but trust me, as soon as you play the game and as soon as you play through the game, you start to realize just how genius the idea is, and the fact that like the levels themselves, it isn't just like a generic cover shooter that you would come to expect from this generation. No, this isn't like a Gears of War clone or anything like that. This is a game that was developed around this aggro mechanic, and you start to see like genuine genius designs, especially in some of the enemy types. You'll have these enemies that are, you know, have like flamethrowers and Gatling guns, and they have all this armor on the front, and you're like, well, how am I supposed to defeat them? So then your partner has to draw aggro so you can sneak around the environment, pick off some of the enemies as you go, but you can't shoot too much because if too much aggro gets on you, then you have to repeat the whole process. It's this whole balancing act. How much do you shoot? Who are you going to pick off? And then you work your way around the enemy, pick off the Gatling gun guy. I won't say too much more because I don't want to delve into spoiler territory, but this is a great game, and the story, you know, it's not like the deepest thing in the world. It's not like a Last of Us by any means. That being said, the story in this game is still really good. You know, you got some military type stuff in there, and then you also have some conspiracy theory type stuff going on in there. It's a fantastic game. It's on Game Pass, and you can pick up a copy on eBay for no more than like $6 or $8. I highly recommend this one. Oh, and it's also on PC, and it goes on sale quite often, so definitely give this one a shot. And for our next game, this is a PlayStation 3 exclusive. This actually came out relatively early in the PlayStation 3's life cycle. In fact, it came out before trophies were even a thing, but that is Heavenly Sword. This one, I definitely can't talk about this one for as long or go as in depth with this one as I did on Army of Two, because there's a lot of story in this game, and I really don't want to spoil any of these games for you guys. So basically, to explain explain it the best that I can to keep things as simple as I can. I don't want to be reductive when I say this, but this is kind of like a God of War, Devil May Cry type clone. You know, you have like different combos you can carry out, you know, the hack and slash combat. But the thing that sets this game apart is, you know, not only the combat, because you know, you have these different stances you can do, different ranged abilities, different, you know, close quarters abilities, then you have like your strength stance. The thing that really sets this game apart from other God of War slash Devil May Cry slash like Dante Inferno type games is honestly like the charisma and the personality of all of the characters. This is one of those games where I actually found myself enjoying the times that the villains were on screen. I enjoyed every single second that any of the bad guys or the villains in this game were on screen. Between their dialogue, their character designs, and just like the, I don't know, the art direction and the script for this game is just, I love it. King Bohan is genuinely one of my favorite villains in gaming just because of his personality and the way that he delivers his lines. I'm sorry that I can't say much more about this, but you know, there is a lot of story here, and beyond the game, like, it's hard to talk about the gameplay because, you know, I don't want to spoil the surprises that the game has in store for you later on, but yeah, definitely worth picking this one up. I believe I got this copy for like, what, maybe $15-ish. It's definitely not like as cheap as something like, say, Army of Two, but if you go on eBay, you could easily find a copy for less than 20 bucks, probably somewhere between like 10 to 20, somewhere in that range. Next up, this is a series that definitely deserves way more love. That is Dynasty Warrior 6. Now, this goes for any Dynasty Warriors game, really, whether it's, you know, the original ones, or even the spin-off games like Hyrule Warriors, for example, which, amazing game, by the way. Now, there are stories in these games, but, you know, when you're playing these games, it's definitely mainly for the gameplay, or at least that's what you're going to be spending a lot of your time doing. If I could define this game into a genre, it would be hack and slash meets RTS, but put an emphasis on real time, because you normally with RTS games, you probably immediately think of those like old school PC games or whatever, but no, when I say real time, I mean, we're talking like third-person action game type of real-time. Like, you're in the moment, and you're basically like a one-man army against thousands of enemies. And I'm not kidding when I say thousands. Like, by the time that you finish a round in this game or a level in this game, you're looking at somewhere between 1,000 to 3,000 kills. You're just hacking, you're slashing, you're sending bodies all over the place. And surprisingly, this game is rated T, but, you know, there's not like any crazy gore in this game. Like, you're not chopping off arms and heads and stuff like that. Like, it's literally just their bodies, like, flying all over the place. But yeah, basically, like I said, it's just you're a one-man army against thousands of enemies. You're running around, you're capturing outposts, you're defending your outposts, you're making like these split-second decisions where it's like, okay, am I going to go to this outpost now? Do I need to go capture this outpost now? If I capture this outpost, will this be more advantageous for me now? Or should I go capture this? Should I defend this? Okay, there's a big enemy or a big horde of enemies coming here. Should I clear those out, or do I have enough time to do this other thing? Do I use this ability now? Do I save it for a later time? Like, it may sound a little stressful as I'm explaining it, but trust me, once you play the game, you get into this like indescribable flow state where it feels really natural as you're playing it. And honestly, if you have like a Wii U or a Nintendo Switch, I highly recommend picking up Hyrule Warriors. That game is absolutely phenomenal. It's essentially Zelda meets Dynasty Warriors, and man, that game is so underrated. That game is so good. I can't even describe it. Playing as Link and just pulling off all the combos that he has access to in that game. Like, if you're a Zelda fan, it's worth experiencing. If you're a Dynasty Warriors fan, it's worth experiencing. So definitely go play Hyrule Warriors, but if you don't have a Nintendo system and you just have like a PlayStation or an Xbox or whatever, definitely at least pick up Dynasty Warriors, because these games are amazing. Next up, this one will definitely be a little controversial because it is from a rather famous series. In fact, it is so famous that it has one of the most famous gaming memes of all time, like, tied to it, that being, can it run Crysis? Now, the one that I wanted to highlight today is Crysis 2, and you may be wondering, like, why are you talking about Crysis? Everybody knows about Crysis, but the thing is, everybody knows about Crysis. Crysis 1. Nobody, and I do mean, like, nobody that I've talked to, maybe I'm just talking to the wrong people, nobody mentions Crysis 2 or 3. Barely anybody has played Crysis 3. I've met a few folks that have played Crysis 2, but most people haven't even touched the third one. So really, this is kind of like a 2-in-1, either Crysis 2 or Crysis 3. Though if I was to recommend one or a certain order, I would say play Crysis 2 and then play Crysis 3, because there's a few references in 3 that call back to Crysis 2. I would recommend playing all 3 of them, if I'm going to be honest. However, at this point, I'm sure everybody has played Crysis 1 at least once. Also worth mentioning is that all 3 of these games are on Xbox Game Pass, so you can play them that way. But basically, the main reason, outside of like maybe a few story things, that I would recommend playing the second one before the third one is because while the first one is a great game, 2 and 3 are kind of like their own thing. Like, 2 and 3 feel like a duology, whereas Crysis 1 kind of feels like a thing over here that was a bit more experimental, if that makes any sense. Like, all three of them still do feel like a nice conjoined trilogy. However, 2 and 3 definitely have a different direction that they took, and they both feel very similar. And if you played Crysis 2 before 3, I feel like it would make you appreciate the changes and, you know, certain things that they did in 3 just a bit more if you play 2 first. But the main premise of Crysis 2 is that, you know, the aliens are invading again, and this time they are invading New York. And, you know, the game starts out, you see New York, it's real sunny, it's New York as it always is, as it always should be, and then you see the aliens come in, and one of my favorite parts of this game is how you get to watch New York fall. You get to see it go from this beautiful city that it is to just an absolute wasteland. And it's not like one of those things where it's like, aliens aren't here, everything looks great, and then the aliens come and it's just immediately destroyed. No, you watch the city fall, like, slowly and slowly. It gets more corrupted, more things get damaged, you watch literal, like, skyscrapers come down. I remember when Crysis 2 first launched back in the day, and obviously I was playing it on my console, and I was like, how is, like, my Xbox 360, like, even running this right now? And then when I revisited this game last year on PS3, I had the same thoughts, just like, how is my console even running this right now? This is insane, because not only are the effects the same, but, like, you know, obviously the Crysis games are kind of known on console for not always having the best performance. I mean, like, they're playable, but, you know, sometimes the frame rates do get a little low. Personally, low frame rates don't bother me. You know, I grew up with, like, PS2 and PS1 games and stuff like that. So, you know, GoldenEye 64, you throw C4 and immediately everything's running at 5 FPS. So yeah, needless to say, I can play a game through at, like, 15 FPS and it honestly would never bother me. I just like fun games. That being said, Crysis 2 and 3, both on PS3 and Xbox 360, you know, despite how insane, like, the games honestly look like PS4, Xbox One titles, maybe even beyond that. I mean, there are certain screenshots in, like, Crysis 2 and Crysis 3 where it's like, oh my, like, that looks like a modern game. Yet despite that, it still runs incredibly well. It maintains a pretty solid frame rate for the most part. Yeah, all in all the Crysis games, all 3 of them are fantastic. I highly recommend any of them, but, you know, I rarely ever hear people talk about, like, 2 and 3 anymore, so I figured I'd mention it in this video. And for our last game, this one's definitely going to be a little divisive because there's literally an entire genre named after these games, so you may be wondering why I'm including it, but that is Demon's Souls. Now, again, you may be wondering, like, why are you even talking about Demon's Souls? You know, it has the PS5 remake, more people know about it, but the thing is, before the PS5 remake even came out, some people thought that Dark Souls was the first Souls game. There were so many people that didn't even know that there was a Souls game before Dark Souls, that being Demon's Souls. And you also may be wondering, like, why would you recommend the PS3 version if the PS5 version exists? And that is because there's something about the PS5 version, it doesn't work for me the same way that the PlayStation 3 version does. There's something about the PS5 version, it feels more like generic castle RPG. Music feels out of place in certain places. The graphics don't exactly all blend together the way that they should. You know, the art direction is a little off in some spots, or some things were changed that really shouldn't have been. And I know that may seem rather nitpicky, but for me personally, it's just whenever I've played the Demon's Souls remake or whenever I watch gameplay of it, it's just something feels disconnected, and it doesn't really feel true to itself in the same way that the original version of the game does on PlayStation 3. The original version feels like one complete cohesive experience. Everything complements each other. The music complements the graphics, the art direction complements the music, the gameplay just complements everything else. Like, it all just works together so well. And while the PS5 remake is great, there's just something about it where I didn't feel immediately immersed and connected to that world on PS5. I didn't have that urge to keep playing. If anything, I kind of had the urge to stop playing. It's just, there's something about it. It's similar to the Halo Anniversary. Like, I can't play the Halo Anniversary Edition. Whenever I play it, it's just something in my brain. It wants to stop playing. Like, the feels are off, the vibes are off. It's just like, I don't know, it's something about it. It just feels out of focus. Like, I don't know. There's just something about it. It like, something about it just doesn't mesh right. Whether it's the music not really meshing well with the graphics, or the graphics not really meshing well with the music. And yeah, same thing with the Demon's Souls remake. It's just, I don't know. And I know for a fact I'm not the only one, because after I played it, I went and searched up on, like, Reddit threads and YouTube just to see if I was the only one. And no, there was literally, like, tons of video essays and threads on Reddit talking about that exact same thing. So I'm glad I'm not alone. But yeah, if you are to play Demon's Souls, I would highly recommend going for the PS3 version. This is the definitive version of Demon's Souls. Now, if you only have a PS5, yeah, play the Demon's Souls remake. It's still a great remake of the game, and it's still absolutely phenomenal. Of course, it's Demon's Souls. That being said, if you do have the option, I would highly recommend going for that PS3 original. It's not too expensive nowadays, and it's definitely worth the purchase. Oh, and can we also get a shout out to the Maiden in Black track from the Demon's Souls soundtrack? That is just, that track is amazing. But anyways, these are 5 hidden gems for the PlayStation 3, so now I definitely want to hear from you guys down below. Have you played these games before? Do you plan to play play them after watching this video. And also let me know if you want more videos like this. Obviously, I've made a couple videos similar to this for the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 2, and obviously these, you know, if you know anything about the PlayStation 3, these obviously aren't the only 5 hidden gems. Like, I could make I can make an entire series just on the PS3 alone. So if you want more videos specifically on the PS3, or maybe on another system like the Wii U or the Xbox One or the Xbox 360 or the original Xbox, literally any console, just let me know and I would totally be down to do it. I love making videos like this. Anyway, as always, a shout out to all of my patrons. Thank you to the patrons and the $1 tier, and an even bigger thank you to all my patrons at the $5 Big Baller tier, Mellow Last King and Big Daddy Matty. And the biggest thank you of all to the absolute legends in the $10 G tier, those being Raiden Revengeance and Lil Cheese Girl. Thank you guys so much. Your support is seriously, I can't even describe how much it means to me. It is beyond appreciated. Thank you so much. I love all of you. Thank you guys for watching. Have an amazing day. Stay beautiful. I love you all. Peace.